guys, John Michael with Peridot. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about that dreaded moment you get a tax notice and how to deal with a tax notice. Easy for me to say, but when you get the notice or you see that envelope in the mailbox and it says it's coming from the IRS or the State Department of Revenue, the first thing to say is don't panic. The second thing I am going to say, make a note, is it coming from the state or from the IRS? Many times we get clients coming to us to help with a tax notice and they're talking about the IRS and how they, this notice from the IRS, and lo and behold, it's actually the State Department of Revenue, and they're thinking about different things. So you want to be aware of that. So the first thing is obviously just read the notice fully. The notice, for the most part, if it's the first one you're getting and it's not a collection notice from a previous notice, you want to read it in full and it will tell you what it's going on. A lot of them can be very benign, not a big deal. Hey, we got an update of your address, or there's some information change. But you do want to read it fully, because sometimes there may be an actionable item on these notices and there might not be. They may say, hey, here's something we think might be going on. If it's not, don't worry about it. And if it's not, then don't worry about it. So make sure you read that notice thoroughly and try to perceive what is the action item of that notice. A lot of notices that are the scary ones are the ones when you owe money. So you want to look at, okay, what is it saying I owe? Does it make sense? And, if that's the case, it may be valid. It may be, oh, yes, there was a 1099. I totally forgot to put that on my tax return. I forgot completely about that. This is valid. I'm just going to pay this notice and be done. Or it might not be valid, and that's where you might want to try to figure out how to deal with that. So make sure you read it thoroughly. That's number one. Make sure you're aware of if it's IRS or Department of Revenue, so you can know how to deal with that. Some valid notices are, yeah, you forgot to put income on your tax return. Some are just saying, look, you owe extra interest and penalties. This happens a lot. You do your taxes, you pay your taxes, you get a notice saying you owe another, a couple $100 or whatever, depending, and it's just because you owe interest and penalties. And people are like, why is this happening? Well, if you paid taxes after the due date, which is April 15th, they may assess some extra interest and penalties on that. But if you're not sure, it might not be that. Read the notice. It'll tell you what these interest and penalties are. If you're just getting a collection notice, and it's just saying, hey, you owe us money, and it's not explaining why you owe that money, well, that means you missed a previous notice. Previous notices will explain, hey, you owe us money, and this is why. If you ignore that notice, you're going to get another notice saying, hey, you still owe us this money. So if you're just getting the you owe us money with no explanation, that means you missed the notice that gave you that explanation. But just read through it. Sometimes it may be that you owe tax, and a lot of times they can be wrong. I mean, a lot of times an example of it being wrong is that we've had clients that say you owe tax. They paid the tax. They paid it on time and everything was paid, but when they paid it, they just misapplied it to the wrong year, or even, and bear with me here, to the spouse. And so the collection system, and you can watch my other video of how the IRS works, is didn't match something up, and it spit out saying you owe this money because the payment was misapplied or not applied directly elsewhere. So you have to respond. You can either call them up. Calling them might be the easiest and quickest way, assuming you can get a hold of the IRS, and say, look, I paid this. I have my checking account in front of me. It came out on this date. Most likely the agent on the phone will be able to say, okay, yes, I see the payment. It just didn't get applied, or it went under your spouse's social. I know that can be confusing, but that happens. A spouse may have made the payment online under his or her social, but the tax return was filed under the primary taxpayers, which was the spouse's social, and it may not match it. That sounds silly, but that's how the IRS works, so that's a common issue. Some may not make sense. You may be like, what is this even saying? I've seen plenty of notices that haven't even made sense to me, and that's when maybe you might want to seek help. The first thing we do when we get notices like that, the other thing to make sure of these notices is look at the tax year they're talking about. A lot of times people say is, oh, something's going on, but it's actually from 3 years ago and they're like, oh, that makes more sense. So look at the tax year. But when we get these notices, we don't know what's going on. The first thing we do is pull up the tax return in question, and we do a little side by side. What is the notice saying? What is the information we have that was filed? Where's the discrepancy here? Are they saying there's something missed or what's going on? That may or may not help get down to the bottom of it. At the end of the day, there's avenues to dealing with it. It may involve calling the IRS. It may involve writing a letter. It may involve hiring a professional to represent you before the IRS or the Department of Revenue. Certain professionals can do that. You can get what they call a tax power of attorney, where they can call the IRS, do all these things on your behalf, which may or may not be better, just depending on the situation. Always go to your tax preparer if you're not sure and don't understand it after you've read through it. Have your tax preparer look at it, see if they can give you any insight as to why this might be. And at the end of the day, if you need to hire somebody to help deal with it, you can. It's never a bad thing just to call the IRS, say, hey, I got this notice, can you tell me what it is? Of course, you got to call the IRS and deal with that. But the main thing, don't panic, read it thoroughly, look at the tax year, look if it's IRS or Department of Revenue, try to understand what's going on. It may or may not be valid. You may think it's something the preparer did, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but at the end of the day, is it still a valid notice? If you think, well, the preparer messed up, but it is true, I do have this 1099, well, if it's valid, you're going to have to pay that. So paying it and everything is still a valid recourse. Sometimes the best answer is just to pay the notice. And then you can talk independently to your preparer something about why that may have been. I would say talk to your preparer before you do anything to allow for that opportunity to look at it together and to see if there's anything you can be done. There's things that can be done. You can ask out of penalties. You can ask for certain things. This is getting into collections, which is going to be a different video. But if you owe taxes, you don't want to pay it, there's payment plans. You can do potentially an offer and compromise. There's ways that you can maybe help to reduce that and maybe make that a better situation for you. But read through the notice thoroughly and don't panic.